What if you were born with zero power in a world where everyone has skills? Yuga Yajima is the powerless son of legendary S-rank heroes, bullied by arrogant Jaegers and forced to clean up monster corpses for a living. But after watching his entire team get slaughtered because of those same arrogant heroes, he's left for dead. In his final moments, he makes a pact with a death god to gain a forbidden power, the ability to raise his fallen comrades as his personal undead army to exact his revenge. A massive blue portal had appeared in the city, casting a glow that illuminated the skyline. The authorities quickly moved to seal off the area, restricting access with barriers and stationed guards. A man approached the barricade, moving without hesitation. When challenged, he revealed the badge clipped to his shirt. The guard stepped aside, and he passed through the portal into the dungeon beyond. Inside, the atmosphere was thick and unsettling. The light dimmed, the air carried an unnatural chill, and a faint echo lingered with every step. The dungeon's oppressive silence was broken only when he advanced far enough to find signs of battle. In the cavern ahead, a team was already engaged in combat. One of their members had already been slain, his body brutally torn in two. Standing against them was a massive blue dragon, its scaled body glowing faintly as it let out a guttural growl. Two survivors remained, visibly shaking as they faced the monster. Fear gripped them, their hands trembled as they tried to keep their weapons steady. At that moment, the man stepped into the cavern. A faint purple aura swirled around him as he stood there, cold and silent. His sudden presence caught the attention of the survivors. Both turned to look at him, wondering in confusion who he was and how he had appeared. A system window materialized, displaying his information. Yuga Yajima, Demolisher, Corpse Disposal Team. The female survivor's thoughts raced as she recognized the title of his unit. Her companion, still frozen in fear, could only wonder what sort of skills this Yuga possessed. Yuga did not speak. Instead, he removed his hood. As he did, his skill activated. His face began to transform, red lines spreading across his skin as if etched by fire, while his eyes turned a piercing crimson. His aura thickened, cold and menacing. With nothing more than the flick of a finger, he summoned a glowing purple sigil that spread across the ground. The two survivors gasped in shock at the sight. The girl urged her companion to move back, sensing the danger of standing near the circle. Yuga's expression remained unchanged, dark and cold, as the summoning completed. From the circle erupted a massive form, Fafnir, a rank B undead dragon. Its crimson aura burned like fire, its roar shaking the cavern as it rose. Yuga stood atop it, commanding it as if it were his own extension. Fafnir lunged toward the blue dragon, meeting the monster head-on. The dragon retaliated, energy building in its maw before it unleashed a torrent of blue flame. Fafnir intercepted the attack, clamping its fangs around the energy and neutralizing it, shielding the survivors from destruction. Yuga raised his hand, signaling the next move. Fafnir beat its wings and soared into the air before diving down, pinning the blue dragon beneath its massive claws. The summoned beast then gathered fire in its throat and released it in a torrent that engulfed the blue dragon completely. The struggle ended swiftly. The blue dragon thrashed violently, but the flames consumed it until it collapsed lifeless against the dungeon floor. The cavern fell silent, except for the survivors' trembling breaths. They could only stare, overwhelmed at how Yuga had dispatched a C-ranked boss monster with such ease. Without a word, Yuga commanded Fafnir to withdraw. The undead dragon let out a final growl before vanishing into the void, leaving only silence behind. One of the survivors, still staring at Yuga, felt recognition dawn. The thought echoed in his mind with dread. Yuga Yajima was none other than the forbidden Necromancer.
Inside the dungeon, workers carried out their tasks, cleaning away the dead monsters and collecting materials that could be put to use. Among them was a worker in a full protective suit, his face hidden behind a mask. While working, he made a mistake. This was Yuga Yajima, a demolisher, an apprentice of the Corpse Disposal Team. His skill was none. As Yuga continued dismantling, his blade came into contact with a substance that began corroding and rusting the metal. It was a dangerous sign. From behind, a man approached and warned Yuga not to let his guard down, explaining that the body fluids of a hell lizard contained deadly poison and that even the slightest skin contact could kill. This man was Daigoro Tsukushi, the leader of the corpse disposal team and a demolisher. He possessed the normal skill of enhancement attribute level 2. Yuga nodded in agreement. Daigoro told him that the handicap of not having a skill could be compensated with experience, advising him not to rush and instead insert the blade at another point. Following this advice, Yuga tried again. As an apprentice, he was tasked with dismantling corpses and turning them into materials, but he was also a human who had never awakened a skill. 7 years earlier, mysterious spaces called dungeons had suddenly appeared. From these, monsters emerged and threw the world into chaos. Amid that chaos, the magical power emanating from the dungeons awakened special abilities in most humans. These were known as skills. Among them, those who gained strong power were called Jaegers, becoming beings capable of standing against monsters. However, Yuga's skill never awakened. The scene shifted. Yuga was now packing materials and vacuuming the air from the packet. When he let out a small sigh of relief, a girl approached from behind, remarking that he had gotten good at the task. She was Kiriko Kimishita, a member of the corpse disposal team, and a demolisher with the normal skill of Earth attribute level 1. Yuga blushed and thanked her. Another team member then teased Yuga, claiming his face had turned red. This was Satoru Tsukui, also a demolisher, whose skill was wind attribute level 1. Kiriko placed her hand on Yuga's head and teased him, calling him cute. Yuga told her to stop, while Satoru acknowledged Yuga's remarkable growth. Kiriko then turned to Satoru, accusing him of being too slocky, and pointed out that at this rate, Yuga would surpass him as a junior. Satoru apologized in embarrassment. The team continued their work until others approached from behind. The dismantled materials they knew became research components for medicines and other uses. When brought to the Jaeger Association, they could be exchanged for rewards. However, one of the newcomers suddenly snatched the packet from Yuga's hands, declaring that they would be taking it. The right to exchange dismantled materials for rewards belonged only to those who defeated the monsters. The corpse disposal team members were subcontractors, hired by Jaegers in exchange for meager compensation. As subcontractors, they could never defy their Jaeger clients. No matter how angry or miserable they felt, they had no choice but to endure. Later, Yuga sat with his team as they ate lunch. He remained quiet, eating silently. Satoru asked him if he wanted to become a Jaeger as well. Yuga, shocked, denied it. Suddenly, Kiriko interrupted, asking if his parents had been S-rank Jaegers. Yuga nodded in agreement. Satoru was stunned, remarking how incredible it was for both parents to hold S rank. Kiriko added that only a handful of Jaegers in the entire country reached such a level. Yuga then admitted that he had always dreamed of becoming a Jaeger like his parents. But 7 years ago, during the unprecedented stampede, when monsters overflowed from dungeons onto the surface, both his father and mother went missing. His sister Reina had also been left unable to walk due to injuries sustained at that time. Satoru, curious, remarked that it must feel awkward to have S-rank Jaeger parents while lacking a skill. Kiriko grew angry and shouted at Satoru, but Yuga calmly admitted that it was a fact. He added that he had not given up and explained that if he became a Jaeger, he could ensure his sister lived comfortably. The reason he had taken the corpse disposal job was to be as close to Jaegers as possible. Kiriko softened at his words. Yuga clenched his fist with determination and declared that this was why he wanted to become a Jaeger like his parents. Daigoro, the team leader, found his resolution admirable. Kiriko hugged Yuga from behind, smiling joyfully and promising to cheer him on. Satoru agreed, offering his support as well. Daigoro then stood and called the team to move on to the next site. When Satoru asked if they wouldn't get a lunch break, Daigoro scolded him for being spoiled. Yuga then admitted that he actually liked the corpse disposal work too. Daigoro smiled knowingly, saying he had already realized that. Satoru, looking at Yuga with disbelief, asked if he was serious, questioning how he could enjoy a job that was dirty, dangerous, and demanding. The 3 Ds. Daigoro immediately grabbed Satoru by the neck, angrily demanding what 3 Ds he was talking about. Satoru weakly responded that this was exactly what he meant. Daigoro declared that the day's meal would be his treat, but that Satoru would get nothing. As they prepared to leave, Daigoro called Yuga to join them. Standing there for a moment, Yuga wondered if he could truly become a Jaeger someday. The scene shifted again. Another portal had appeared, and the corpse disposal team was present. Daigoro informed them that this site was a C-rank dungeon. Yuga was shocked to hear this. Satoru asked him if it was his first time in a C-rank dungeon, teasing if he was scared. Yuga denied it firmly. As they entered, Daigoro reminded them that even if the dungeon rank was high, their work remained the same and there was nothing to fear. Yuga agreed with him. The 4 of them walked forward, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Yuga noticed some dead goblins lying nearby. Kiriko asked him if he knew about the dungeon rumor. Yuga wondered what she meant. With a serious expression, Kiriko explained that some believed the souls of humans who died in dungeons couldn't find peace and turned into monsters. Sweat formed on Yuga's face as he wondered if she was serious. Satoru, half smiling but unsettled, asked if she truly believed in such urban legends, adding that she had unexpectedly cute sides. Kiriko then jokingly threatened to test it out on him, making Satoru immediately refuse. Daigoro warned them that if they kept chattering, he would leave them behind. As they continued forward, they were suddenly stunned to find a huge monster lying dead on the ground. It was a cyclops. Standing nearby was a team of 5 members, likely the ones who had killed it. Yuga and his team were amazed as they stepped closer. A girl from the group moved forward, catching their attention. Kiriko remarked that another amazing person had appeared. Yuga was shocked to recognize her. She was Kagari Tadarabu, a B-rank Jaeger affiliated with orders, possessing the normal skill of Air Attribute level 5 and a unique skill called All Attributes, All Range. Satoru, astonished, commented that she was a top-class Jaeger who was currently all the rage, and noted how beautiful she was. Kiriko urged him to greet them properly. Daigoro used a device to display his identity, introducing himself as Daigoro Tsukushi of the Demolisher Corpse Disposal Team. Yuga also activated his device. From Kagari's group, a man stepped forward. He was Raido Kurosaki, a C-ranked Jaeger affiliated with orders, who possessed the normal skill of Fire Attribute level 4 and the unique skill clone, also known as Mirage Raid. Raido asked Yuga if he truly had no skill. Yuga fell silent, a worried look on his face. Raido laughed at his lack of ability. Kagari quickly stopped him, but Raido mocked further, saying that someone without a skill was simply incompetent. He questioned whether it was safe to entrust work to someone like Yuga. The words left Yuga deeply disheartened. Raido placed his foot on the dead monster, smirking, and remarked that corpse disposal teams were all crazy people who enjoyed cutting open monster bellies, so it was no surprise if incompetents were among them. Yuga clenched his teeth in anger, glaring at Raido. Activating his fire skill, Raido asked Yuga why he was looking at him like that. Pointing a flaming hand toward him, he threatened not to get cocky and asked if he should burn him to charcoal. From behind, Kagari whispered coldly for him to stop. She activated her power, forcing Raido to halt. As squad leader, she told him she could not overlook his behavior and ordered him to stand down. Raido obeyed, walking away. Kagari then told Daigoro that her team would wait outside the dungeon door, asking him to inform them when their work was finished. Yuga, amazed, realized that she was not much older than him and truly lived up to the title of Child of Skills. Kiriko approached him gently and asked if he was all right. Yuga nodded. Daigoro reassured Yuga, telling him that he had nothing to be ashamed of. Their work was theirs alone, he explained, and titles or the presence of skills did not matter. What mattered was giving one's all regardless of what others said. Yuga was impressed to hear this. Daigoro then called the team to begin their work. They all nodded. Meanwhile, Kagari's group still lingered near the dungeon gate. Raido began walking out, and Kagari asked him where he was going. She reminded him of their promise to wait there. Raido dismissed her concern, saying headquarters could deliver the materials later. Kagari tried to argue, but Raido claimed there was no problem since the squad leader had seen him deliver the finishing blow to the boss. Calling for the others, Raido ordered them to leave. Kagari asked them to wait, but they ignored her, walking out. She followed behind, still calling for them to stop. Inside, the disposal team continued their work. Yuga looked up at the enormous dead monster and thought that if such a creature went on a rampage, nothing would last long. Suddenly, its eye moved. Yuga screamed in terror. The others quickly turned toward him. Sweat dripped from his face, his expression empty, as he stammered in disbelief that the monster had revived. Then he muttered desperately that it was wrong. Before their eyes, the massive creature rose again. Revived, it now stood towering in front of Yuga. He realized in horror that the Jaegers had failed to confirm the kill.
As the monster came alive before them, the group froze in shock, sweat visible on their faces as fear overtook them. Daigoro shouted for everyone to run. Without hesitation, they all sprinted toward the massive door. Yuga, while running, turned briefly toward the monster, his thoughts racing as he wondered what this creature was and whether it was truly alive. Satoru shouted in frustration that they must have failed to finish it off, cursing the ones responsible. Daigoro cut him off, yelling that there was no time for talking, only to keep running. They reached the door, believing for a moment that they had somehow made it. As they struggled to push it open, the monster hurled a massive boulder at them. They managed to dodge by leaping aside, but the impact blocked the doorway completely. Sitting on the ground, panic etched on their faces, they could only watch as the monster stepped forward. It raised its massive hand to crush Yuga, but Daigoro threw himself in front, blocking the strike with his arms. He had activated his enhancement attribute, level 2, strong arm, to withstand the blow. Blood poured from his nose and mouth as he admitted that he could not hold it much longer. Still straining under the monster's strength, Daigoro shouted to his team, pointing toward a hole on the wall and ordering them to escape through it. In the next instant, the monster's fist crushed Daigoro's body, blood splattering into the air. Yuga screamed for his boss, his voice breaking in disbelief. Trembling, he muttered that this could not be happening. Kiriko, standing behind him, urged him to run. The three survivors dashed toward the hole. Once inside, they caught their breath, only to see the monster lumbering toward them. Fear gripped them as they wondered desperately what they should do. Kiriko asked Satoru about his skill. He replied that he possessed wind attribute, level 1, but trailed off. She pressed him, asking if he could use Sonic Edge. He nodded reluctantly, admitting that it was an attack technique. Yuga questioned if she was actually planning to attack the monster, but Kiriko declared that they would defeat the Cyclops themselves. Satoru panicked, shouting that the idea was reckless. He reminded her that it was a C-rank boss, impossible for them to defeat without combat experience like the Jaegers. Kiriko snapped back, trembling as she repeated that she already knew. With tears threatening to fall, she insisted that if they kept running, they would simply be killed anyway. In frustration, Satoru smashed his fist against the wall, cursing their situation. His body trembled as he attempted to summon his ability, admitting that he had never properly used it before. With effort, he conjured a wind blade in his hand, wind attribute, level 1, wind blade, Sonic Edge. Holding the weapon, Satori told Kiriko that he had managed it. Kiriko glanced at Yuga and told him to stay where he was. Yuga only stared back with a strange expression, remaining silent. Frustration welled within him. Gritting his teeth, he muttered bitterly that at a time like this, he could do nothing and questioned why he was like this. Kiriko then told Satoru that she would hold the monster back while he struck. Satoru answered that he understood. Yuga's thoughts drifted to his past as he whispered, "Why did I not have anything of my own?" Kiriko and Satoru rushed out of the hole, while Yuga remained behind on his knees. Kiriko pressed her hands to the ground, activating her ability, Earth Attribute, Level 1, Sandlock. The ground shifted and clamped around the monster's legs, binding it in place. She shouted that it was stopped and urged Satoru to strike. Satoru lunged forward, clutching his wind blade, but the monster's fist smashed into him before he could connect. His body slammed into the wall, blood splattering as his bones crushed under the blow. Yuga screamed Satoru's name in horror. Kiriko, still standing before the monster, whispered that there was no way. Her face was pale and hollow. On her knees, tears streamed down her cheeks as the monster advanced. She cried out for it not to come closer, and in that instant recalled her mother. But the monster's massive fist crashed down, crushing her where she knelt. Blood burst across the stone floor. Yuga called her name in disbelief, his voice cracking with horror. The monster now approached Yuga, who still knelt frozen in despair. As it loomed before him, his eyes widened in terror when it raised its foot above him. He closed his eyes, sobbing as tears fell, certain that death was moments away. But suddenly, Daigoro appeared again, shoving Yuga back and bracing himself against the monster's descending foot. He shouted at Yuga to struggle and never give up until the very end. The next instant, the monster crushed Daigoro beneath its weight, his body breaking apart. Yuga rolled across the floor, screaming his boss's name. His eyes darted helplessly across the chamber. First, he stared at Daigoro's broken body and called for him. Then, his gaze moved to Satoru's corpse, and he cried out his name too. Finally, he looked to Kiriko's lifeless remains and screamed hers too. The monster stepped toward him once more. Yuga sobbed that if only he had been stronger, if only he had possessed a skill. His cries grew louder as he repeated the words again and again, if only he had a skill. Suddenly, his hand closed around a blade lying on the ground. Fueled by desperation, he lunged at the monster, stabbing into its foot again and again. He shouted for it to lift its foot from Daigoro's body. But the monster's massive hand came down from behind, slamming into his head. Blood sprayed outward. The next instant, Yuga opened his eyes and looked down to see his own feet. Confusion gripped him as he wondered where he was, certain that he should have been dead. His eyes shifted around the unfamiliar place. Then he saw it. His eyes widened in shock at the sight before him. a grotesque tree, its surface like twisted veins, consuming the bodies of Daigoro, Satoru, and Kiriko. Yuga scrambled to his feet, staring in horror at his fallen teammates, but then someone else appeared. He turned his head and saw a figure clad in a black cloak, a skull masking its face, and a staff gripped tightly in its hand.
Yuga was shocked to see the figure and fell back in fear. He asked who the figure was. The figure introduced himself as the Guardian of Souls, the one who governed reincarnation. Yuga wondered aloud about souls, unable to understand. The Guardian explained that he collected, dismantled, and reincarnated the souls of humans who died in dungeons, adding that, in Yuga's own words, one might call him a death god. Yuga's eyes widened with shock as he muttered the words, "Death God." He then wondered if he himself was dead, unable to do anything, unable to save anyone, his own powerlessness made painfully clear. In that moment, he suddenly remembered his sister Reina. Memories of his mother and father followed, and then the deaths of his teammates, Satoru, Kiriko, and his boss Daigoro. He recalled Daigoro's final words, urging him to struggle and never give up until the very end. Sitting on the ground with his hand pressed against his chest, Yuga declared that it could not end like this, not without accomplishing anything. The Guardian then asked if he wanted to live. Yuga answered that of course he did, that he wanted to live, and as he began to say more, the Guardian cut him off. The Guardian questioned what he could accomplish without a skill, and Yuga's eyes widened at the words. The Guardian pressed further, asking if it would not be the same as being dead. Yuga clenched his teeth in frustration and regret. The Guardian then asked if Yuga also desired power. Yuga looked toward him in confusion and asked what he meant. The Guardian clarified, asking again if Yuga desired power. Yuga questioned whether it could be possible, and the Guardian confirmed it. He explained that Yuga could obtain a skill he could never gain no matter how much he yearned for it, and that he could return to the mortal world once more. Yuga yelled that the answer was obvious. The Guardian then told him the truth. The skill was a forbidden power capable of subjugating even the souls of the dead. Through suffering equivalent to hell, the skill would eventually devour Yuga's own soul. It would transform him into a death god who hunted all souls in the world. Yuga muttered the word hell. The Guardian then asked if Yuga had the resolve to become a death god even so. Yuga clawed at the ground in frustration, as memories of his past surged back. Times when others were rewarded for the work he had done, when he was bullied, when he had faced a monster, and when the gates first appeared and he had been unable to help his sister. Yuga muttered that he had nothing, no abilities, no talent, no courage, and said he was powerless. Still on his knees and crying, Yuga declared that it could not end like this, not without accomplishing anything. He shouted that he could not let everyone be killed right before his eyes and do nothing about it. The Guardian narrowed his gaze upon him. Yuga's expression turned dark and cold as he said that if he could avenge everyone, he would become a death god or whatever it took. With that, the Guardian raised his hand and cast some sort of spell. He said that Yuga's resolve had certainly been received. In the next moment, Yuga was flying through an endless void with no clothes upon him. He wondered what was happening and where he was. A status window appeared before him, and he questioned if he now possessed a skill. The display revealed Demolisher Corpse Disposal Team, unique skill, undeadification. Yuga wondered about this undeadification skill and whether it was truly his. Another window appeared, asking if he wished to unlock it. With a firm expression, Yuga accepted.
As Yuga pressed the confirmation, his hand began to transform. His entire body followed, turning a deep purple as he screamed in pain. In the next moment, he returned to his body inside the dungeon. Blood splattered across his uniform as a dark purple aura swirled violently around him. Looking at his hands, he muttered that this must be the skill undeadification, and that he certainly looked like a monster. His glowing red eyes narrowed as he declared that he did not care. Fixing his gaze on the monster that had killed his teammates, he thought that if this power could avenge his boss and the others, then so be it. With that resolve, Yuga lunged forward at an intense speed. The monster turned, swinging a massive punch, but Yuga leapt upward, narrowly dodging. With a fierce blaze in his eyes, he clenched his fist and hurled himself at the beast. His punch landed with all the strength he could muster, but the monster remained unharmed. Instead, Yuga's hand shattered, his bones breaking with a sickening snap. The monster retaliated with a brutal punch, sending Yuga crashing into the wall. Dazed and bloodied, Yuga looked down at his broken body and muttered in disbelief that he was still alive. His wounds then began to knit back together, though the process was agonizing, forcing him to scream as flesh and bone reformed. A window appeared before him, announcing Immortal, Basic Skill, Undying. Effect, Constant Recovery. Furthermore, persists even when receiving lethal damage. Yuga realized that even fatal wounds would not kill him, though the pain was unbearable. Clutching his face as he endured the torment, he muttered that this was the undeadification skill. The monster struck again, crushing him under its fist, blood splattering across the stone. Yet as it raised its hand, Yuga was already rising to his knees, his purple aura whirling as his mangled body slowly regenerated. Flesh crawled back over shattered bones until he stood once more. With a grim expression, he declared that if this was the case, then they would see who lasted longer. The furious monster swung again, but Yuga dodged with a swift leap, clambering up onto its massive arm. His legs thickened, veins bulging with newfound strength. Launching himself forward, his arm, now denser and stronger than before, slammed into the monster's eye. The beast roared and collapsed to the ground, though Yuga's fingers broke again on impact. He fell too, gritting his teeth through the agony, watching his hand slowly regenerate once more. The pain was unrelenting. The monster rose and stomped him underfoot, but Yuga again began regenerating. He wondered frantically what was happening to him and why he still lived. Consumed by fury, the monster smashed him again with its fist, tearing off one of his arms. Yuga screamed, shouting at the beast to try to kill him as it had killed everyone else. The monster hefted a massive boulder and crushed him beneath it, but once again, Yuga regenerated from the wreckage. A window appeared, warning him, when skill points reach 0, undeadification will be forcibly deactivated. Yuga, still healing, grinned that he would need to hurry. Yet the monster's assault continued, another crushing blow leaving him on the ground, regenerating but unable to move. Cursing his helplessness, Yuga muttered desperately that there had to be some way. Suddenly, the purple aura surrounding him blazed violently, and from the corpses of his fallen teammates, streams of the same light erupted. His eyes widened as he saw purple-colored souls rising from their bodies. Before him, the skeleton of Kiriko rose, wrapped in the dark aura. He remembered her words from the past, that the souls of humans who died in dungeons could not find peace and became monsters. 3 skeletal figures now stood above him, swirling with power. Skull Knight, Wind, D rank. Skull Knight, Guard, D rank. Skull Knight, Earth, D rank. A system window appeared, asking if he wished to command their corpses. Yuga remembered the skull given to him by the Guardian and the warning about a forbidden power capable of subjugating even the souls of the dead. Realization struck him. This was the very ability. He was about to control his boss and his comrades. A faint, twisted smile crossed Yuga's face. Rising once more, he faced the monster with grim determination. He called upon his fallen allies, asking them to lend him their strength.
Yuga stood firm in front of the monster. The creature swung its fist toward him, and Yuga took a defensive stance. Yet, in the next instant, Daigoro's skeleton moved forward, blocking the monster's attack with its shield. Yuga was shocked to see it move, and wondered whether he had somehow made it act. He then ordered the skeleton to charge, and with precise timing and force, the skeletal warrior pushed the monster back, sending it crashing onto the ground. Yuga realized in disbelief that the skeleton had moved exactly as he thought. Amazement filled him as he understood that this was the power of the command ability. Multiple system windows appeared before him, and while watching the notifications, he muttered that it seemed the skills were inherited from when they were human, carrying over as they leveled up. He looked toward the skeletons and asked his seniors for their help. The skeletal figures turned their heads toward him, and Yuga requested them to fight alongside him. The monster rose again and advanced toward them. Yuga directed Satoru's skeleton to activate Sonic Edge, the wind attribute skill. At once, the skeleton held a wind blade in its hand and lunged at the monster. With a swift slash, it cut through the creature's leg, forcing the beast onto one knee as blood poured from the wound. Seeing the effect, Yuga quickly commanded Kiriko to move next. Her skeleton activated Stone Spread, unleashing a barrage of small stones at high speed. The projectile struck the monster at several points, staggering it. Yuga, yelling for the monster not to fall yet, then commanded Daigoro's skeleton to act. It forced the beast to the ground once more. The skeleton then activated Strong Arm, grabbing the monster by the leg, roaring with strength and hurling it into the dungeon wall. Yuga stood, watching as the monster smashed against the stone. Yet the creature rose again and rushed at him with renewed fury. Yuga looked at his HP in the system window and in a cold tone remarked that if the monster was planning to buy time, he would not allow it. Kiriko's skeleton then used Sandlock, binding the monster in place with its ability. Yuga's eyes blazed as he shouted that he would end it. He commanded Satoru's skeleton to once more activate its wind blade. The monster looked toward them in fear as Yuga gave Daigoro's skeleton its order. With Strong Arm activated, the skeletal warrior lunged forward holding the blazing blade, throwing it with tremendous force. The monster's eyes widened as the weapon hurtled toward it, but in a furious effort, the beast smashed the blade aside, deflecting it upward. As it looked above, Yuga was already in the air. He leapt to grab the blade mid-flight, clutching it tightly as his aura and eyes flared. With fury, he shouted that it was now the monster's turn to cower in fear of death. He hurled the blade down, striking the creature's eye with immense power. Landing hard on his knees, Yuga looked on as the monster collapsed, its eye closed. He began walking toward it as multiple system windows appeared before him. Drawing the blade from his uniform, Yuga's aura blazed as he muttered in a cold voice that this monster was the reason his teammates had died. His eyes burned with fury as he raised the weapon to stab into the creature. But before he could strike, Daigoro's skeleton stepped in front of him, halting the attack. The silent skeleton looked into Yuga's eyes. Yuga muttered in shock, recognizing his boss. Suddenly, memories of Daigoro struck him, and he stopped. He lowered his weapon and apologized to his fallen leader. His body then began transforming back into human form as he looked at his hands, realizing that he had managed to defeat the monster. Remembering the Guardian's words, Yuga muttered that the Death God had spoken the truth, the power to subjugate even souls. He reflected that the enemy had been a Cyclops, a C-rank monster, while he himself now carried the undeadification skill. Then pain suddenly racked his body. He fell to his knees, sweat dripping from his face, as he wondered if this was skill backlash. As he collapsed, the skeletons of his teammates began to fade away. Lying on the ground, pushed to his very limits, Yuga thought of Satoru, Kiriko, and his boss, Daigoro. With gratitude, he thanked them all for lending him their strength and making it possible to take revenge. He remained thankful to them until the very end.
When Yuga opened his eyes, he found himself lying on a hospital bed, his head and face wrapped in bandages. Staring at the ceiling, he wondered where he was. Was this really a hospital? He looked around in confusion and then thought about where everyone else might be. Suddenly, the memories came rushing back. He remembered the deaths of his teammates, the monster crushing them, and the scene where he had managed to defeat it. With a rush of panic, he pushed himself upright on the bed, muttering with a pained expression that everyone had died. A system window appeared before him, and Yuga's eyes fell on it. Curious, he opened the stock option, where he saw the names and ranks displayed. Skull Guard, Daigoro, rank 0. Skull Earth, Kiriko, rank 0. Skull Wind, Satoru, rank 0. Realizing what it meant, Yuga understood that the system had kept everyone by his side. Lying back down, he closed his eyes, recalling the skeletal figures of his teammates whom he had commanded. With a heavy heart, he muttered that he had forcibly held back those who had been trying to pass on. At that moment, a knock came at the door. Startled, Yuga quickly pointed toward the system window to turn it off. With frustration in his voice, he called out for the visitor to just go away. But as the door opened, it revealed a girl in a wheelchair, his sister, Reina. Yuga was shocked to see her there. She rolled into the room, her eyes brimming with tears, and rushed her wheelchair toward him. Slapping him, she cried out, calling him a stupid big brother. She yelled that when she heard about the dungeon accident, she thought her heart would stop. Yuga's expression dropped as he muttered that his had stopped, but seeing her angered gaze, he softened and explained that he had only thought so. Reina's expression shifted to sadness as she told him she knew he was working hard for her sake too. She said she didn't want to lose any more family and begged him not to do anything reckless.
Yuga gave her a slight smile, rubbing her head as he told her that he felt the same way. Another knock sounded at the door. Kagiri and Raido entered the room. Kagiri excused herself for coming, while Reina looked at her in awe, muttering, "Who might she be? Such a beautiful person." Yuga also wondered the same. Kagiri apologized for the sudden visit, but Raido, standing arrogantly behind her, remarked that there had been no need to come. Kagiri, wearing a sad expression, explained that she had seen the footage from his income camera. It was truly a tragic sight, and the incident was entirely their responsibility. She had at least wanted to offer an apology. Reina asked her if she was perhaps a Jaeger. Kagiri looked at her and asked if her name was Reina, explaining that her name had been listed in Yuga's profile. She introduced herself formally as Kagiri Tatarabu, Jaeger from Orders. Reina bowed her head and thanked Kagiri for saving her brother, but Raido, still arrogant, muttered that like hell he'd save trash like that. Both Reina and Yuga were shocked at his words, and Kagiri quickly stopped him from speaking further. Yuga turned to his sister and asked her to wait outside, explaining he had work cleanup to do. Reina nodded and wheeled her chair out, smiling as she said that Jaeger work must involve a lot of classified matters. She apologized for not realizing sooner. Kagiri accompanied her outside, offering to escort her. As they left, Raido smirked and commented on Reina's body with a vile tone, adding that it was a shame such beauty was wasted in a chair. Yuga gritted his teeth in anger. Frustrated, he turned away and told Raido that he had nothing to discuss with him and asked him to leave. Raido sneered in response, saying he might consider it if Yuga gave him some reward money, since they were the ones who had carried him there. Yuga asked if he really had. Raido smirked and admitted that he had actually suggested leaving Yuga behind, since there was no point in wasting effort on a single bug. Yuga's eyes narrowed with anger, the tension rising thickly between them. Raido went on, saying that Yuga had entered the dungeon of his own will, had taken daily wage work knowing the risks, and that whatever happened was his own responsibility. Yuga clenched his fists, thinking bitterly to himself that everything was his own choice, everything was self-responsibility. He knew that truth better than anyone. He remembered the words of the Guardian, asking if he had the resolve to become a death god even so. Grinding his teeth, Yuga snapped back at Raido, saying that wasn't it their fault for failing to finish off the boss in the first place? Were they ignoring their own responsibility? The tension grew heavier. With an evil smirk, Raido taunted him further, saying that by choosing to become part of a Demolisher corpse disposal team, Yuga and his comrades had already declared their lives worthless. Yuga's face twisted with anger. He yelled at Raido to take back those words. Raido looked confused, but Yuga shouted again, demanding he take them back. Kagiri, standing outside, heard Yuga's voice rising. Yuga continued to shout, demanding Raido get on his knees and apologize to the families of his teammates who had died because of them. Raido's fury flared. With insane speed, he lunged forward, grabbing Yuga by the shirt, demanding he repeat what he had just said. He pressed closer, asking again in rage, calling him a super. Kagiri rushed back inside, telling Raido to stop. In the next instant, she used her ability to throw him across the room, slamming him into the wall. She then bowed and apologized to Yuga, promising to sincerely apologize to the families of those who had died. But Yuga shook his head and said that Daigoro and the others wouldn't want anyone to be blamed either. He wanted to end the discussion there. At that moment, another man entered the room. Dressed in a black suit, he remarked that it seemed a skill had just been activated there. Walking over to Raido, he asked him if he was all right. Kagiri bowed deeply and apologized, saying there had been a slight misunderstanding. He turned his gaze on Yuga and greeted him. He introduced himself as Shinra Norizuki, a skill investigator from the Jaeger Association, with the ability Skill Investigation Analyze, Level 5. Yuga's eyes widened in shock at the presence of an ability investigator. Without delay, Shinra explained that he would now examine Yuga with his skill. Analyze, he said, forcibly opened another person's status window, revealing various information including skills, traits, and weaknesses. He then spoke of the incident, saying that there were several puzzling points. He confirmed through the income footage that Yuga's 3 colleagues had been killed, but their bodies had never been recovered. Where had they disappeared? That was one mystery. Another was that the Cyclops, a C-rank monster, had been defeated. That meant someone with at least C-rank power had been present, yet only the Demolisher corpse disposal team was supposed to be there. Yuga's face grew tense, sweat forming on his brow. Shinra continued, reminding him that using unregistered skills is illegal, and therefore he wanted to confirm Yuga's abilities as the only survivor. Raito, now leaning against the wall with his usual sneer, scoffed that there was no way Yuga had a skill. But Shinra ignored him, excused himself to Yuga, and raised his hand, a blazing blue energy forming upon it. Yuga's heart raced in panic. This was bad. He was not ready for this.
As Shinra's cold gaze settled on him, Yuga felt the crushing pressure of being analyzed by the man's ability. His heart pounded with the dreadful thought that this was a bad situation. Awakened skills were normally registered with the Jaeger Association immediately, but his was an irregular, cursed skill. If Shinra discovered the truth, Yuga imagined he would be treated as nothing more than a lab rat for the rest of his life. A translucent system window flickered before Shinra's eyes, but its result left Yuga stunned. It was completely blank, showing no skills at all. Yuga could hardly breathe, wondering how it was possible. After a moment, Shinra straightened up and addressed him with calm detachment, stating that their investigation was complete. He apologized for having jumped to conclusions and, with a polite bow, thanked Yuga for his cooperation before leaving. Raito immediately burst into crude laughter, declaring that he had been right all along and that Yuga was just a faker using some kind of window device. Yuga remained silent, though his hand trembled slightly. Kaguri, however, broke the silence with a voice softer than usual. She explained that her younger brother had been the same as Yuga, possessing no skill. She confessed her arrogant belief that she could have protected him regardless, but her voice faltered with grief as she trailed off. Yuga listened as her words settled heavily upon him. As she rose to leave, she told him to contact her if he ever found himself in trouble. Yuga simply nodded and quietly thanked her. In the parking lot, Shinra was about to get into his car when Raito's sharp voice called out, demanding to know why he had bothered investigating someone so weak. Without turning around, Shinra replied that the Jaeger Association existed to investigate and protect new types of abilities. Raito scoffed, saying he already knew that much. Shinra's gaze sharpened as he turned, pressing Raito to consider who had really defeated the C-ranked monster. The question left him momentarily speechless. Kaguri, who had followed them out, added to the inquiry, asking about the 3 deceased corpse disposal members and the monster's remains, which Shinra himself had noted were mostly gone. Shinra's expression darkened. He explained that while incomplete remains were not unusual after such carnage, this case was different. Nothing was left at the scene except bloodstains. Of the 4 people present, only Yuga had survived, and none of them should have been able to defeat a C-rank boss. Kaguri suggested a unique skill could have been involved. Shinra confirmed her suspicions, stating that an ability capable of erasing remains and defeating a C-rank monster would have to be placed under strict surveillance. This, he explained, was why Yuga had been a suspect. He concluded that knowing they were wrong was an equally important outcome, and with that he entered his car. Raito muttered to himself, wondering about an unknown skill strong enough to kill a C-rank monster. Kaguri quietly observed that the association would never overlook such a Jaeger and would surely keep them under watch. Raito sneered at the idea, finding it ridiculous that a rogue Jaeger with B-rank or higher skills would just be walking around. Kaguri said nothing more, but an image of a man standing atop a slain monster flickered in her mind, causing a faint rush to rise in her cheeks. As she walked away, she pondered what kind of unknown skill could make bodies vanish. Meanwhile, back in the hospital room, Reina had dozed off in a chair. Yuga gazed at her sleeping form with a gentle expression, as memories flooded his mind. He recalled a happy day at the beach when their father snapped photos of them, their laughter mixing with the sound of the waves. That memory was shattered by the one that followed. His parents shouting for him and Reina to run, to live, and to never look back as they battled a monster. He had clutched Reina's small hand, both of them crying as they fled for their lives. The present returned with cruel clarity. Yuga gently held Reina's hand as she slept, and with his other hand opened his system window. It responded smoothly, displaying a new notification. It revealed that his undeadification skill had its information concealed and protected. Yuga's eyes widened in understanding. That was why Shinra had seen nothing. His skill was hidden from others. A tangled feeling of relief and unease settled in his chest as he stared at the setting sun. 3 days later, Yuga was discharged from the hospital. As he pushed Reina's wheelchair out of the hospital, she expressed her doubt that he was truly okay leaving so soon. He gave her a faint smile and assured her that he was fine, as all the tests had shown nothing abnormal. Reina playfully announced that she was going shopping and had a surprise for him later.
Yuka chuckled, pointing out that it was no longer a surprise if she announced it. He asked if she would be all right on her own, and she confidently spun her wheels, reminding him how many years she had been using the chair. Watching her go, Yuga's expression darkened as Raido's rocking words about Reina replayed in his mind. He was disgusted that such a man, rotten in his humanity, could be a high-status Jaeger. He clenched his fists. He had always wanted to be like his parents, a shield that protects and a sword against monsters. He thought that dream could come true, but Shinra's blank analysis confirmed it was impossible. He could never reveal his skill, which meant he could never become a Jaeger. He had thrown that possibility away the moment he made a deal with the Death God. Suddenly, chaos erupted. People screamed and shoved each other in a frantic rush. An emergency announcement blared from nearby speakers declaring a dungeon stampede from an E-rank breach in the district and ordering all civilians to evacuate. Yuga's blood ran cold. Reina was still nearby. From the streets ahead, a swarm of man-eating goblins poured out, clawing and biting at screaming civilians. Blood splattered across the pavement as they dragged people from cars and tore them apart. Yuga's face went pale as he took in the endless tide of monsters. The situation was dire. The surging crowd knocked him to the ground, and he heard desperate shouts for Jaegers. But as he stared at the grotesque scene, a chilling realization sunk in. There were no Jaegers there to help.
Goblins broke through the shattered glass of an overturned bus, but before they could climb inside, a massive, monstrous hand gripped the vehicle from behind. It belonged to a creature so huge that even the goblins froze in fear at its presence. Inside the bus, people trembled and screamed for their lives. Yuga's first and only thought was for his sister's safety. At that moment, Reina was inside a shopping mall on a high gallery floor. Far below, goblins crashed through the main entrance, their arrival met with the sounds of shattering glass and horrified screams. Back on the street, Yuga observed grimly that there were no Jaegers present. Raido's mocking voice, calling him a bug, echoed in his mind. His jaw tightened. He acknowledged that while there were no Jaegers, there was indeed a bug. With that thought, he began to transform, activating the cursed skill he had kept concealed. As his undead mode awakened, his body shifted and his physical abilities surged. In this state, so long as his health remained, he could revive again and again. He rushed headlong into the chaos, his teeth grinding with a singular purpose. At the very least, he thought, he should be able to find Reina and escape. Before he reached the mall, however, his eyes caught a different scene. A mother and her crying child were trapped inside a glass waiting area as goblins pounded on the walls. She clutched her child tightly, shielding them while the glass began to crack. The sight sent Yuga's mind spiraling back to the day his father fought a demon, screaming at him to run and survive. Another strike fractured the glass. Just as a goblin raised its weapon for the final blow, Yuga erupted forward, his kick sending the monster flying. Immediately, more goblins surrounded him. As one lunged, he drew his dismantling knife and, with a smooth motion, sliced clean through its neck. Another attacked with slashing claws, and while Yuga blocked with his blade, its second arm raked across him, leaving a shallow wound. With a burst of power, he leapt into the air, clutching his knife tightly. He felt that for such small fry, the dismantling knife alone was more than enough. Slashing down, he severed another goblin's head, his eyes burning crimson as he wondered how many monsters he had dismantled in his life. He was faster than the next goblin that lunged, piercing its body and dropping it lifeless to the ground. From behind, the child cried out a warning. Yuga spun just as a massive shadow loomed over him. An enormous monster wielding a blade swung down, and he barely leapt aside in time. It was an orc, an E-rank monster. Yuga steadied himself, knife in hand. He knew an orc's skull was harder than stone, and its upper body was pure muscle. His dismantling knife could not pierce it. He concluded that to kill it, he would have to take its legs first. With blinding speed, he slashed both of the orc's legs. The monster roared as it collapsed to its knees. Yuga then leapt high, twisting mid-air as the orc raised its head. He came crashing down, stabbing his knife straight into its skull with all his strength. The monster let out one final scream before it fell. The child's eyes were wide with awe. The mother clutched him tightly and, through tears, thanked Yuga for saving them. He told them firmly that the area was still dangerous and urged them to hurry and escape. She nodded quickly and ran, taking her child's hand.
Yuga turned back to the overwhelming number of monsters flooding the streets. He realized grimly that if he stopped to save everyone, he would never reach Reina. Just then, a small voice called out from behind, wishing him good luck and calling him a Jaeger. It was the boy he had just saved. The word made Yuga freeze, a tightness in his chest. He was not a Jaeger, he told himself. He had no responsibility to save anyone. He just needed to rescue Reina and escape. But as he watched the mother and child vanish to safety, another thought crept in. If the stampede was not stopped, everyone there would die. His eyes turned toward the dungeon. If he could conquer it and destroy the source, all the monsters would vanish. Looking down at his hands, he whispered a silent apology to his sister. Then he raised his gaze to the sky, vowing to his father that he would not run anymore. With a roar that echoed through the chaos, he declared his intention to stop the stampede. The goblins screeched and swarmed toward him. Yuga charged in return, his knife flashing as he cut down multiple enemies in a single wide arc. For the first time, he was not thinking about what he could do, but what he must do. He reasoned that the Jaegers were not making it in time, or perhaps they had no interest in a low-rank dungeon to begin with. The child's words echoed again, but he pushed them away. He knew he could never become a Jaeger, not with a cursed skill that had to remain secret. Lowering his gaze, his expression hardened. He was nobody. Yet, as goblins fell one after another, he felt a truth in his merciless movements and cold, precise strikes. A darker identity stirred within him. If he had to call himself something, then he was a death god. With crimson eyes blazing, Yuga carved a path straight toward the dungeon's entrance.